Hello everyone, Pryon here. Today I will be making for you a updated for 2025 what does your Dead by Daylight killer say about you? And it's been a long time since I made the last one of these. So many killers have been added to the game, so it is time to update this. But before I get into the start of talking about the killers, I do stream Dead by Daylight on Twitch regularly at Pryon_TV, so please do check me out there. I've been streaming pretty regularly and I play both sides, and it is a fun time. So, we'd love to see you there, but without further ado, let's get into the killers. We're going to be going in chronological order here, starting with the Trapper. Trapper is the classic. If you play the Trapper, you probably like to drink water or black coffee and order chicken fingers at every restaurant where it's possible to. Trapper players prefer to look ahead rather than defeating their opponents based on pure mechanical skill, and they love it when a good plan comes together. But at the end of the day, the Trapper player cares more about having fun than winning. Wraith, a solitary fellow who would rather wait for the perfect moment to strike than actually chase survivors. You are looking for a chill experience that doesn't require much input to reach the skill floor, but it still has a lot of room for advanced mastery. If you play this killer too much early in your DBD career, you may end up with some terrible balance takes once you start to play against better survivors. Hillbilly. The anatomy of the Hillbilly main has changed drastically since my last video, and he's now populated by highly competitive mechanical gods who are drawn to being the #1 killer in the whole game. There's a much higher barrier of entry than the Nurse, but also a higher ceiling. There are a minority of Hillbilly players left over from when he used to be bad, and still adhere to his old chill playstyle. But those who have mastered Overdrive Hillbilly are some of the most competitive and driven players, caring about winning above all else. The Nurse. The original I want to win and I don't care if you are having fun player. Although some of these players have migrated to Hillbilly, Nurse is still the queen of making people rage quit. The Nurse player didn't have to work too hard initially to pick their killer up, but once they figured it out, they made the Nurse their entire identity. They can be seen with a Nurse-themed Steam profile or Nurse-themed username. They can also be found coping about how Hillbilly and Blight are better than her, and that somehow means that survivors should love playing against her. The less aura-reading perks this Nurse player has in her build, the more scared you should be of them. The Shape. Michael Myers players are that kid on the bus that thought it was peak comedy to blast the Soviet march anthem from a speaker with no headphones. A few people laughed, and then they did it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. 2-0 laughter. Dead silence, in fact. Sorry, Michael Mins. Scratched Mirror isn't really funny anymore. They say they're going for jump scares, but in reality, they're bringing a map offering and sitting behind a wall exactly 17 meters from the hook with permanent aura reading on the poor solo queue player trying to save. Tombstone isn't very fun either, and nobody plays his other add-ons these days. We're sorry, Michael, it's just not funny anymore. It's one thing to play a boring killer that's more like watching paint dry than playing Dead by Daylight, but the problem here is that the Michael players expect everybody else to enjoy it. Hag. If you legitimately main the Hag, I have serious respect for you. Your killer has been broken down and beaten indirectly by every quality of life change that survivors get, with very little given to her to compensate. True Hag enjoyers are unflinching in the face of being hard countered by everything from items to map offerings to survivors being able to talk to each other in Discord. Hag might not be very fun to play against most of the time, but I've never met a Hag player that wasn't a cool person. Which isn't very high bar because there are only like 3 of you. Doctor. Doctor players like the sound of survivors screaming more than they like winning. It's a great killer for new players, and also a great killer for hyper-competitive tournament play with restrictions and perk bans. But between those two extremes, there's not much for Doctor players besides silly terror radius and skill check builds. So most Doctor players are just silly little guys who like the way that he can get use out of perks that no one else can use, like Merciless Storm or Distressing. Huntress. As one of the most popular killers in the entire game, Huntress players come in many, many flavors. Whether it's a new killer that just wants to have a ranged power, a guy with a muscle mommy fetish, or someone who just enjoys that she's the only killer with a truly infinite skill ceiling. Most players agree that the more seriously you play Huntress, the more boring she gets. The more you care about winning with Huntress, the more you realize that it just boils down to holding up a hatchet in front of a hooked survivor, and that's not fun for anyone. So the dedicated Huntress mains tend to be fun-loving and care about hitting cool shots a lot more than they care about winning. Bubba. Bubba players are the lovable goobers of Dead by Daylight. Ever since the anti-camp mechanic was added, there are almost zero reasons to hate Bubba. Just look at the way he walks. Is that the posture of a hated killer? I don't think so. Bubba players are terminally silly, in a good way. I would go so far as to say that Bubba players are the orange cats of Dead by Daylight. Freddy. Pig. Pig players come in two types. Hardcore Saw fans that just really love Amanda herself, or players that are in utter denial that Pig is an M1 killer and thus not very strong. They'll follow one survivor with an active trap on their head, turned around so chase doesn't start, for the entire game, just to make sure that one person's head explodes. They can be found only winning against the poor masses of solo queue survivors and voicing their bad balancing takes when they get rinsed by a coordinated team. Clown. Clown players think they are funny, but they actually are funny, unlike the Michael players. Although Clown is somewhat one-dimensional to play against, which can be boring, you just kinda have to pre-drop every pallet against him, there is a surprising amount of depth to Clown from the killer side, as noted by Aranad's infamous 100-plus page Clown guide. Clown players live to laugh along with their killer, and they really resonate with Kenneth's impeccable knife-flipping skills. Spirit. Spirit players have endured significant nerfs over the years, and what's left is a surprisingly balanced killer compared to what she once was. The Spirit player is quite proud of their craft, and has extreme knowledge of the little-known details in the DBD game engine. Stuff like the way grass moves, the way sound occlusion changes when a survivor moves back and forth on a corner, which survivors have the quietest breathing or the loudest footsteps. Spirit players also tend to be skin collectors. They dress Rin up like she's their daughter going to school. They may also be lore enjoyers drawn to her tragic character and striking visual design inspired by famous Japanese horror. Legion. Sorry, Legion mains, but you are that weird kid in the back of the class drawing Sonic the Hedgehog OCs and neglecting all of the important parts of growing up. Like learning what other killers do, and that there are way more rewarding killers to play than Legion. If your killer needs to have Enduring and Spirit Fury to win a chase, you might want to play a stronger killer, or maybe get better at the game, or both. The only thing this killer has going for it is their banger chase track and mixtape add-ons. Plague. A killer for the thinking man or woman, Plague demands that the player be proficient both in the basic M1 chase, but also have a high understanding of the unique vomit projectile. Add in the decision of when and where to take your corrupt purge, and you have a killer that, when played well, is a pretty solid indicator of intelligence. Ghostface. Ghostface players are not here to win, and we love them for that. If you want to play for jump scares, this is the killer to actually play. Thousands of Dead by Daylight e-girls with Ghostface-themed Steam profiles will immediately ask you out on an e-date. Ghostface is an M1 killer for high testosterone individuals with venture capital to spend and more offshore assets than Pinhead has chains. Demogorgon is mostly played by chill guys and girls looking to level the playing field as much as possible. Not too much strength, but not too little. Some mobility, but not too much. Demogorgon has it all, and gives both sides chances to have fun. You also really love Stranger Things, but you already knew that, and I didn't need to say it. Oni. Oni players want to have a strong and mechanically complex killer without forgetting how the normal killers have to live. Oni players are very proud of how good they are in a basic M1 chase, because they have to start like that every game. Oni players also love having the potential to end a game in only one use of their power, and they don't mind starting slow, because they know that punching survivors quickly 1,000 different ways is a lot less fun than practicing one punch 1,000 times and having that one punch end the game instantly. Deathslinger. Deathslinger players are mostly comprised of FPS gamers that have somehow made their way into DBD. They tend to be more competitive than their Huntress siblings in the ranged category, but they still want to go for crazy shots. They're more inventive though. Instead of relying on aura reading like Huntress players, they tend to look for tiny openings in the map geometry to fit their gun through. Executioner. Executioner players are sadistic and brutal. They revel in the helplessness of a survivor who's just had 75% of their build turned off by a cage. You can be sure that while the Executioner player does enjoy going for blind shots with their shockwave, they will never pass up an opportunity to tunnel. It's almost as if they see every survivor as James Sunderland. Blight. Blight players are that one kid that the moment they realize they like a game, their next Google search is X game speedrun, X game exploits, X game world record. Obsessed with doing everything to the competitive extreme, Blight attracts the type of gamer that would probably be better off playing a more competitive game than Dead by Daylight. Twins. Twins players are an extremely rare breed, but of those who do actually play them, most are unfortunate creatures who enjoy bleeding everyone out on the ground. It's sad, but twins will fail to grow a unique player base because of their buggy nature and strange power. So often, all that is left is those who choose their killer based on what is most miserable for survivors to play against, and twins is definitely up there. Trickster. Trickster players are one of two things: an FPS aim purist who really enjoys tracking. Tracking is something that is not really present in Dead by Daylight except for Trickster. Most ranged killers just have a one and done shot, but not Trickster. In games like Counter-Strike, Overwatch, or Call of Duty, tracking is actually an incredibly important skill, so Trickster scratches that itch for a lot of ranged killer players. The other people that play Trickster are only playing killers that they find hot, and there are quite a few people in this community who find Trickster very hot. Nemesis. The Nemesis player really identifies with Nemesis. Run fast, punch all of your problems away, and put minimal thought into it. But that's a good thing. It's a real why use many word when few word do trick type of killer. Never stop running, never stop punching. Nemesis is made to look and feel like an unstoppable force, which makes it all the more funny when the person playing him is very stoppable. Pinhead. Another thinking man or woman's killer. Pinhead's power is an objectively worse and harder to use Nurse Blink. Box control adds a strategic and fun element to his kit that smart players hold a crazy mastery over. Overall, Pinhead players can have a stranglehold on the game by seemingly doing nothing from the survivor's point of view. This makes them incredibly polarizing. They end up actually resembling the Cenobites themselves in how many people love or hate them. Demons to some, angels to others, huh? Artist. Every chase is a puzzle to be solved for the artist player. If I put a bird on this window and another one facing this way, and then another bird on this pallet, then the survivor will have to go here, and then I will get the down. Oh wait, the survivor just held W. GG. Every dedicated artist main I've met has been some sort of programmer or computer scientist. I guess it takes a certain kind of person to want to sling the birds, and that's not a bad thing. You should embrace that, artist mains. Sadako. Sadako players remind me of one of the axioms of making a competitive game. In developing Magic the Gathering, the first developers theorized that there are three types of players in a competitive game. There's Timmy, Spike, and Johnny. Timmy is brand new and only wants to play what's fun. Spike only plays to win and will only play what is objectively the best. Johnny doesn't want to win unless his win was stylish, weird, and unconventional, and forced the opponent into something they've never seen before. Sadako players with their condemned strategies are very clearly Johnny, and now that they can't slug for it anymore, I kinda like that. Dredge. Come explore his garden. This fun and well-balanced killer can go for jump scares while playing completely normally. Dredge's middling tier list placement leaves him without a lot of dedicated mains, but in general, Dredge players tend to be very chill. They're very into the atmosphere and ambiance of the realms in DBD, and are likely to have fun if they had a close game, even if they didn't win. Wesker. Wesker players are hard to pin down because their killer is so popular. There are silly Weskers who will throw the game trying to hug tech something. There are also extremely sweaty Weskers who will take absolutely none of that and hard tunnel someone at 5 gens. But most Wesker players are attracted to his easy to pick up but hard to master power. There's a shocking amount of depth and tech in those 2 dashes, and you would be hard pressed to find a killer power that feels that good to hit. Best of all, even at their mechanical peak, Weskers will never end a game in 30 seconds like some of the S tier killers. So getting that deep and satisfying mechanical experience without making people want to disconnect, at least most of the time, is what Wesker players are about. Knight. Now that Knight can no longer just poop out a guard at every loop to eventually win a chase, the only Knight players left are the honorable ones who really love his character and the ability that he has to command his homies. The 2025 Knight player has frightening knowledge of survivor movements off-screen and strives to have every guard hit something for maximum efficiency. They're always in two places at once. Skull Merchant. After the Skull Merchant was taken out back behind the barn and shot by John Behavior himself, she's only played by contrarians and Anon mode users that want to bleed people out without getting a mean comment on their Steam profile. There's no other reason to play this killer anymore after her changes, and I have nothing nice to say about her, other than that I hope they can rework her into something better. Singularity. Singularity players are the final evolution of the Trap Killer. They have one of the highest skill floors of any killer, needing to both set up effectively at the start of a match, but also think incredibly fast to keep survivors slipstreamed, because if they don't, they'll fall behind the production of the EMP boxes and have no pressure. Playing Singularity can sometimes feel like juggling 10 balls while riding a unicycle. The Singularity main is drawn to that challenge, and the reward of fully understanding where survivors move off-screen, as your guesses as to where survivors are can be directly confirmed with your web of Five Nights at Freddy's cameras. Highly intelligent, but the Singularity main is prone to biting off more than they can chew. Xenomorph. Xenomorph players are drawn to the idea of the monster killer, but they prefer to have a little more strength than some of the other Inhuman characters. With objectively better mobility than the Demogorgon, and a chase power similar in strength to Nemesis, Xenomorph players want to feel like a true predator, often using Monitor and Abuse to shrink their terror radius to only 16 meters while they stalk their prey. They would feel bad, though, if they were playing a killer with no weaknesses, so their reign of terror ends abruptly when survivors put two flame turrets on top of each other. A small subsection of the Xenomorph community is extremely down bad for monster girls, and you can tell which ones they are by who's using the Xenomorph Queen skin. Chucky. Chucky players are the little assholes of DBD. They take direct and personal inspiration from Chucky's voice lines and personality, which I do love, I just hate playing against him, and it shows in their gameplay. Chucky players play like they have never lost a game in their life, and until recently, it was extremely hard to lose on Chucky due to add-ons like Rat Poison essentially playing the game for you. Chucky players always seemed like they were hard carried by playing a extremely strong killer that is yet very easy to use. My thoughts on that have been somewhat confirmed since the Doomed Course chapter hit live with a gigantic nerf to the Rat Poison add-on. Before, you couldn't go 3 games without seeing a Chucky. Now I've played over 30 and not seen a single Chucky since the Rat Poison nerf. I'll let you figure out what that might mean about Chucky players. Unknown. Unknown players are probably the most competitive-minded out of all of the ranged killer mains. The newest addition to the ranged killer roster, the Unknown is extremely complicated to play and play against. This leads to a pretty stressful experience if you're new to using his power, as missing with the UVX launcher is extremely punishing. I would almost say more punishing than any other killer power in the game. Unknown players must have a high level of knowledge about terrain collision surfaces in order to bank their projectile off of walls and manipulate the blast zone so it actually hits survivors, rather than just passing through them and whiffing. Above all that though, Unknown players are big into sound design, lore, and ambiance on their killer. And who could blame them? The Unknown is a design masterpiece. I would even say the best original killer they've ever made. Vecna. Vecna players see themselves as a Gandalf or Saruman type of character, pondering their orbs and wondering which spell would look the most stylish for this kill. There's not really much more than that to say. I feel like I've already summed them up. These guys are always pondering their orb and looking cool as hell. Vecna's abilities are some of the most punishing in the game to miss, so true Vecna mains need to have an extremely high understanding of playing short unsafe pallets for Mage Hand, or slight changes in elevation to benefit Flight of the Damned. Dracula. Dracula players are drawn to his final boss energy similar to Wesker. The way he swaps forms is reminiscent of how a boss changes when you think you finally killed it, and Dracula is more than worthy of being that final boss character, recently earning extremely high tier list ratings now that more people have figured out the optimal way to play him. Some characters are jacks of all trades and masters of none, but I would argue that Dracula is a jack of all trades and master of all, and this draws in a lot of highly sweaty players. Houndmaster. It is too early to make a definitive read on the Houndmaster, but right now her biggest fans seem to be the type of contrarians that used to rage about unpopular killers like Twins and Skull Merchant. She released in quite a buggy state, and we aren't yet done with the time period where all content creators are quote-unquote maining her just because she is new. Once that dust settles though, and we see actually who is continuing to play her, I might have more to say. But for now, it seems like she's going to be a pretty low pick rate killer and loved by those who habitually seek out the clunky and weird killers in Dead by Daylight. So that is going to do it for all of the killers as of December 2024/January 2025. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, check me out on Twitch, and let me know in the comments if you want to put a curse upon my entire bloodline for what I said about your killer.